if you break your fast, but you go overboard with calories, right? Like if you're doing 18 hours of a fast every day, but for those 6 hours out of the 24, you're gorging yourself with pizza and donuts, you're not really doing yourself a service, right? A lot of physicians are going to sit there and tell you that once you're a type 2 diabetic, it is what it is, and it's only going to get worse. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's not true. So that's why it's been shown very clearly in animals. If you deprive them of calories, right, animals who eat less tend to live longer. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of No Limits with Dr. Thierry Jacquemin. I am your host, Dr. Jacquemin. We're going to talk today about intermittent fasting. Actually, we're going to talk about fasting in general. Intermittent fasting has gotten a lot of traction over the last almost decade, but it remains this very nebulous, confusing thing to a lot of people. It remains very misunderstood, misused in a lot of contexts, and there are a lot of different ways to go about it. Now, bear in mind, we're talking about the concept of fasting from a medical perspective, right? There's obviously a lot of protocols for fasting in religious contexts and this and that. We're not talking about any of that. We're going to talk specifically about the benefits on the medical side of things, benefits from the standpoint of performance, from the standpoint of weight management, weight loss, body recomposition, and metabolic reconditioning, which we're gonna address in a little bit. So here's the thing. There are multiple ways to go about it. Everyone, it seems, has an opinion on how it should be done and whether that's the only way that it should be done and so on. I'm here to tell you that the evidence really shows that there are multiple ways to go about it, all of which carry some benefits. For example, some protocols call for prolonged fasts of 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, and beyond to be done with some period of time, right? So some people say, well, it only works if you do 24 hours once a week. It only works if you do 48 hours once a month. That's a bunch of nonsense. Not that there isn't benefit from those protocols specifically. The point seems to be that if you do some degree of fasting with some regularity, that's what the medical evidence seems to show, that there is some benefits. What are the key benefits from such protocols? There's a few of them. Number one, the key component is the majority of the population has become very much addicted to glucose. Addicted psychologically, addicted metabolically speaking, and so on. The body in its ideal state should be running much more on your body fat stores, and on ketones, okay? So this idea that if you don't eat every couple of hours that you will somehow disintegrate and turn into powder is a bunch of BS. You have to train your body to deal with that because we become completely conditioned to dealing only with glucose. Now, am I sitting here and advocating that everybody should be on hardcore pure keto and carnivore diets and this and that? No, although it'll be some interesting subjects for us to cover in future episodes. The point being that if you teach yourself to go through some episodes where you're not relying on food every few hours, then what you're basically doing is you're teaching your body to become metabolically flexible, right? Which from an ancestral perspective is how we were meant to be, right? If you think of our ancestors in more primitive times, they weren't walking around with Tupperwares and chicken and broccoli to eat every 3 hours. They were, you would eat when you would eat, you would hunt, you would eat something, and then perhaps go a few days, a few hours, sometimes even longer without food, and then you eat again. You can, as long as you keep yourself hydrated, here is a little secret that's going to shatter a lot of people here. You're not going to die if you don't eat every couple of hours, okay? You may feel like you're going to die, especially the first few days, as you're reconditioning yourself to rely on your fat stores and on ketones for proper function, but you're not going to die. You have to keep yourself hydrated, right? You will die fairly quickly if you go without water, but you can go a surprisingly long period of time without food. That's where fasting comes in. So again, back to the evidence. The evidence really seems to show that people derive benefit from any protocol that calls for some period of time without food, right? Now, a lot of people misunderstand fasting, right? They say, well, some people will come to my clinic and they say, well, I don't understand. I've been fasting every day and my weight hasn't changed. I don't feel any better, and so on and so forth. And I say, okay, well, tell me about your routine. What are you doing on a daily basis? And I say, well, I eat dinner around 9:30 p.m. Then I wake up the next day and I have a big glass of orange juice, and then, coffee that has, cream and sugar. And then a couple of days later, I have, like a small muffin, but, it's really small. So, and then, 3 hours later, I have lunch. And then these people think that they're actually fasting, right? Or the idea that, I'm just only doing, liquid for the morning. But in those liquids, you're taking in a couple hundred grams of carbs because you're having, your coffee that has milk and it has cream and it has whipped cream and this and that. You're not fasting. If you're taking in calories that are glucose-based calories, you're not fasting. There are some interesting protocols where you can take in the proper amount and kinds of fats that sort of keep you in ketosis or help you sort of go deeper in ketosis. Then you're technically fasting. But if you're adding calories that have glucose and you're making your insulin do this kind of situation, you're not freaking fasting. That's a key component of all this, right? So again, very simple. I tell people, look, if you want to start the most basic intermittent fasting protocol that you want to start, have your dinner at a reasonable hour. You really shouldn't be eating dinner half an hour before you go to bed anyway. So let's say 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever the case may be, you have your dinner, go to bed. That's already a few hours. Remember that as you're sleeping, you're obviously not eating while you're sleeping. So you're also fasting for those hours. If you wake up in the morning, have some black coffee, have some tea without sugar, whatever the case may be, and just delay your first meal by a few hours, let's say lunchtime, very easily, you're already doing 14, 15, 16 hours fast. That's already a fasting protocol, right? So you do, let's say you're 16 hours and then you refeed. Now, where a lot of people go wrong, even with that most basic of a protocol, is they just assume that the refeed is a free-for-all, right? I've also had a lot of those people. They'll come to me and they say, well, I don't understand. I'm fasting and I feel the same. I look the same. Nothing's changed. Nothing's better. I don't get it. Maybe fasting isn't for me. Okay, same thing. If you break your fast, but you go overboard with calories, right? Like if you're doing 18 hours of a fast every day, but for those 6 hours out of the 24, you're gorging yourself with pizza and donuts, you're not really doing yourself a service, right? So you still, just because you're fasting doesn't give you a free passport to eat whatever the hell you want. You still have to be an adult. You still have to mind and condition what it is that you're putting in your body, right? But by reducing the window, what you're doing is you're training your body to rely on fats and ketones. At the same time that you're breaking this most harmful pattern of being insulin dependent, okay? The idea being that more and more the population is becoming resistant, right? Becoming resistant to insulin. It's insulin resistance that makes people fatter. It's insulin resistance that leads to type 2 diabetes. And it's ultimately insulin resistance that ages your tissues faster, right? So like anything else in the human body, do we need insulin for survival? Of course we do. We need some. We don't need it in excess, okay? So the point being that the dose makes the poison, if you will. By having these stretches, whether they be 16 hours, whether they're 24 hours, whether they're 72 hours, what you're basically doing is you're reducing that process, right? Now, for some reason, a somewhat unpopular idea, which I had posted in my channels a couple years ago, and I got some strange pushback, actually, ironically, from a lot of physicians, was the idea that I said, look, I see it in my own patients. There's plenty of evidence that shows this, that if you do some component of fasting regularly and you address the component of insulin resistance, you can actually take a person that is a type 2 diabetic or a person that is a pre-diabetic or a person that has a significant degree of insulin resistance and actually march that process backward. Okay, physiologically speaking, right? I'm going to say it one more time. If you've done certain things to take you down the path of becoming insulin resistant or pre-diabetic or even a type 2 diabetic, if you continue doing those things for the long term, yes, that process will worsen. On the other hand, if you fix thyself and you correct what it was that you were doing, correct the patterns, you correct your nutrition, you start moving about so that you enhance those processes and you make that process of insulin resistance better, you can actually march the disease backward. So it's a dynamic disease process, right? A lot of physicians are going to sit there and tell you that once you're a type 2 diabetic, it is what it is and it's only going to get worse. That's a bunch of bullshit. It's not true. It's not true. Are there cases that are harder than others? Yes, all of that. Obviously, we all understand that people are different. But again, if you continue doing the things, if you continue carrying out the patterns that got you in trouble in the first place, those patterns are only going to worsen. But there are ways to reverse that. An additional major benefit in fasting protocols in general, which doesn't get talked about enough, is the concept of promoting autophagy. What the hell is autophagy? Very simple. If you get through a period of time when you're not shoving calories and oxidative stress of food that your body has to break down and digest and so on into your body has a chance to basically breathe, metabolically speaking, and it starts to clear its cellular debris. So it actually starts to clear old damaged cells from its circulation. So you have time and you have a process by which you can make new cells. So now your hormones are in a more favorable situation. Your growth hormone patterns tend to improve. Even your anabolic hormones like testosterone and so on tend to improve if you do it correctly. So clearing old cells, why does there seem to be a longevity benefit to implementing some kind of fasting protocol specifically for that reason? Because you're no longer damaging your cells in a constant time. Even if let's just take the perfect example, even if you're feeding yourself only the most amazing, organic, perfectly harvested food, your body still has to invest energy and time and oxidative stress to break those items down. Therefore, if you give yourself a pause, your body has a chance to break that down. And now that you don't have the stress of food coming in, guess what? You can actually clear old cells, right? So that's why it's been shown very clearly in animals. If you deprive them of calories, right? Animals who eat less tend to live longer. I hate to tell it to you guys, but we're also animals, right? So physiology applies to everybody here, okay? So that's sort of like an overview. We're going to talk a lot more about some of the specifics of fasting protocols, intermittent and otherwise. But just know that there is a lot of benefit, metabolically speaking, to implementing some form of it, okay? Hopefully you got something out of it. I encourage you to like it, to subscribe to our channel, to share this with as many people as you can. If you didn't like it, still share it because hopefully somebody else will get something out of it. I want to thank our sponsors here, Power Boost, Smart Invest, LUXE Galore Studios, Junglehouse Studios, and I look forward to hearing from you guys and interacting on our channels. See you guys soon.